So now it's time to begin the sidewall construction. I've completed the base wall, and now I have my two paper strips representing the length and width of the sidewalls that I'm going to need for my heart-shaped base. Now, I want to talk a little bit about wedging. When it comes to wedging your clay, either for the base or for the sidewalls, don't forget to do ram's head style wedging. Even for clay that's going to be a simple coil, I'm going to take a fat coil and turn that into a sidewall. There's some creepy ram's head eyes to help you imagine a ram's head. But I want to remind you of I want to tell you about a technique actually that helps if your clay is sticking on your surface while you're wedging. So if you're at home and you find that wedging is difficult to do on a smooth surface, and you don't have fabric handy to wedge on top of, try cornstarch. Believe it or not, cornstarch, when sprinkled on your surface, acts in a way that kind of blocks the clay from sticking. And it's very light, like flour. It's not flour, but it's similar to flour. It's very light and fluffy, and you just kind of smear it around your tabletop, and you wedge directly on top of the cornstarch. And so the cornstarch will release the clay and, again, prevent the clay from sticking. It's totally fine that the cornstarch is sticking to your clay. That'll get smoothed away or wiped away and even burn out in the kiln. So it's not a problem to have cornstarch on your clay. So I wanted to share that little clay hack with you that I learned in college. In any case, I took my wedged clay and I took part of that and rolled out a rather large, fat, chunky coil. When you make your sidewalls, you want them to start as fat coils. Like, think of like the thickness of like a snake body, okay? Real chunky. And you need them to be long, almost ruler length. I mean, look at my sidewall paper template there. It's a long piece of yellow cardstock. As far as the width goes, you don't want your wooden dowels too far apart. Here's where you really need to pay attention to your paper template and kind of line that up with the wooden dowels, so that the height of your wall is, fairly accurate. Okay, so now it's time to flatten that coil using the dowels with a either real rolling pin or a wannabe rolling pin, as I have here. So I'm using a can of starch to flatten out my coil, and the wooden dowels are guiding the coil into becoming the proper thickness, because now I'm going from fat coil to thin slab, but it's a nice, even, consistently thin slab because I'm using that can. Now, the only thing is, I've got the length I wanted, but I can tell I didn't achieve here the width to my sidewall that I wanted. Now I can take my can of starch again, and I can kind of freestyle and stretch out that slab without any wooden dowels, and that might help me get the height to my sidewall that I need. Or I can just kind of forfeit and just go with whatever, is in front of me, whatever the clay produced. And, like I said, I'm happy with the length. It's just that coil didn't flatten out to be the exact width I needed. But I'm just going to go with it and let the clay kind of dictate to me how tall my sidewall should be. And so now I'm just going to cut that down to come as close to my yellow cardstock template as possible. So I'm going to cut around that, and I'm going to use a ruler to get a nice straight edge. And right now I'm just using most of that flattened coil and just cutting it down to be basically a rectangle. So I just cut off a sliver, And I'm going to save that scrap clay. So one side has a nice cut, and I've got my other side that's kind of naturally flat too. And you can tap these sidewalls on your tabletop to get them to be level as well. And, you know, don't worry about any cornstarch, like I said earlier, that's fine. Now I'm going to cut both ends of my flattened coil, and this I do want to line up to my paper template for accuracy. That length is important when building, as you'll see later. So I'm just placing the ruler on top of the paper template so that the ruler is giving me a nice clean cut, not the paper template. Cardstock can still get kind of frayed at the ends and get kind of wimpy, where you can't really trust it to give you a nice clean edge. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. You can see here, I again got the length I wanted, but I didn't quite pull off the height or width to my sidewall that I initially planned for, but that's totally okay. So bottom line is my sidewall won't be as tall as I had hoped. It's still going to be a nice looking tray. Okay. Now I'm going to basically make a twin of this sidewall. I'm going to use additional scrap clay. I'm going to make another fat coil. I'm not really going to use the paper template anymore. This first sidewall will actually act as a template.